Hello, and thanks for watching Behind the Headlines here on WTAJ Plus. I'm Marty Radovanic, and this week, a guy who's in the news a lot is our guest, a person who's very involved in what I would call a political movement, not necessarily political parties, but a political movement. And as we're about to learn, a friend of Charlie Kirk, which makes this conversation even more relevant. We welcome to our program tonight Cliff Maloney, who is CEO of a group called Citizens Alliance. As I was just telling our producer, I've known Cliff since he went to college at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. How many years ago was that, brother? That was quite a while ago, wasn't it?
Graduated 2014. I think we moderated two debates during the 12 cycle.
Yeah.
Chris and Rothfuss.
Yeah, and back then you were just a poli-sci nerd, like a lot. I would call myself a political science nerd. So, we weren't either one of us that impressed with each other. Certainly not that impressed with ourselves, but we did do that, and that was fun. And that was a much simpler time in our political stratosphere, which we'll talk about shortly. But let's go to the friendship that you had with Charlie Kirk. I'm not sure that people who knew him have still been able to process exactly what happened, but that's where I want to start with you. I reached out to you. I believe I texted you the day of or the next day, and you said you were numb. You'd lost a friend. So without getting, I don't want to dig deep into your psychosis, but he was somebody you knew. That had to be a shock to the system.
Yeah, and look, Marty, I don't really think it has fully hit me yet. I think there's different waves to this. I was down in Florida with the Turning Point, which is Charlie's group with Turning Point's one of their spokeswomen and one of their major funders. We were meeting to talk strategy, just about 2026 and even 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And the spokeswoman came back to the table and said they shot Charlie, and she was, obviously very upset. And there's about a million things that go through your mind. Well, did they shoot him in the foot? Is he okay? Is he alive?
Sure,
Is he not
sure.
alive? And the next 30 minutes of just waiting and scrolling, and then that 30 minutes culminating with, unfortunately, having to watch that video that so many of us saw, and immediately, knowing that the odds of him surviving were not great. It was tough. And then to watch Erica give her speech, Charlie's wife, 2 days later on Friday night, that hit pretty hard. Right. That was a moment that I won't forget. But it almost kind of sprung me back to like, listen, if she's that strong, then we have to. And I'll tell your audience, Marty, I mean, I'm a kid that went to UPJ, graduated 2014, was going to be a teacher, did some time at Richland Elementary, and decided that, the political world was something I wanted to dive into.
Right.
And I'm happy to tell kind of the full Charlie story, but Charlie Kirk was really the reason that our group, Citizens Alliance, we launched something called the PA Chase, and we were in charge of Trump's whole ballot chase effort, specific to Pennsylvania. And I have Charlie and my friendship with him to kind of thank for encouraging me and almost assigning me to run that statewide program in 2024.
Let's talk about that, because I don't know that many people now there were people within his organization, people who listened to his podcast, and I'm not trying to minimize his impact. There were millions of people who knew who Charlie Kirk was. But prior to the day he died, there were millions of people who don't know who Charlie Kirk was and what he was doing. And since then, he's been labeled a number of things because he said things in an open atmosphere that some people just aren't going to agree with. And basically, I always decided, and I listened to him from time to time, and, he'd get a little deeper into the weeds than I wanted to listen to, but that was my choice. I always thought I applauded his effort to want to have discussions, okay? But I didn't really know, I knew he was a very successful podcaster. I mean, you couldn't be in our business and not realize, that Charlie Kirk is out there and people are watching and listening to what he's saying. But I think, that for a lot of people now, they're saying, he's now being called a martyr for a cause and all of that. But does that do service to the man and the ideals that he believed in, and the whole reason for him getting into this business and writing books. I guess what I'm saying is he's a celebrity, in air quotes, because of the way he died, not necessarily because of the way he lived to a large group of people, not the people who followed him. I understand he had a very strong following, but who was Charlie Kirk, the man that got you involved? I mean, you must have been impressed with him, obviously, and felt a friendship and a kinship because you went to work doing what he wanted you to do.
Yeah, well, look, I'll answer that in a couple parts. Number one, I met Charlie. I was running Young Americans for Liberty, which was trying to get people elected at the state level by recruiting college students and going out and knocking doors. And Charlie had launched Turning Point USA, another
Right.
college group that was focused on changing hearts and minds. And so we kind of created an alliance, and a partnership back, I would say 2017, 2018, when we had first gotten to know each other. And here's why, Marty. At every event that I would go to, political events, community events,
Mm-hmm.
there would always be Turning Point USA activists there, right? He knew how to recruit real people. And I'm in the people business, right? We love door-to-door programs. I need people that are committed to the cause, that want to get paid, they want to do a job, but it's not for everybody, right? You have to be
Yeah. Yeah.
ideologically driven. Charlie was able to put those things together. And what happened was, this is kind of a personal story, but in 2023, Charlie was presenting at Mar-a-Lago and kind of presenting to the Trump campaign. Listen, of all the swing states where you can harvest or chase ballots due to the rule changes, there's roughly 5, you could argue 6 of those that have these types of long elections, like in Pennsylvania, where we have 50 days of vote by mail, right? When I grew up, there was one day. It was election day,
Yep.
right? Growing up in Delco, like that was it. Obviously, during COVID, they changed all that. And so what Charlie was doing was he was strategizing with the Trump campaign on which areas and which states we needed to hit and which organizations, like the left does, which organizations would get assigned to chasing or harvesting the ballots.
Okay.
Charlie took Arizona and Wisconsin, but he was the one, like I said, that called me and said, hey, does Citizens Alliance want to be the group that runs this program in PA? And when you asked me, who he just was an honest broker. When he called me, he said, look, you guys have to knock 500,000 doors. You're probably going to need 10 Airbnbs across PA. You're probably going to have to hire 120 people. You're going to have to raise $3 million. Is that something you can do? Because we're going to follow the metrics. And all that professional stuff aside,
Right.
he was a great human being, great husband to Erica, great father to his 2 kids. And I'll end this rant by saying, you ask, is he more important now because of who people are finding out he was or because of how he died? No, I think that what's happening is I think a lot of non-political people, because of his brutal murder being so public, I think they've been told or been sold a bill of goods from the left and the radicals that Charlie is some monster. And now that they're listening to his words, I think people are realizing, oh my gosh, this was a 31-year-old kid that they just killed in cold blood, this deranged lunatic. Maybe he's not as radical. And I think that it's opening hearts and minds to really thinking about his message at a deeper level.
Let's talk though, Cliff. Let just to be honest, and so that both sides. And again, I don't like right or left. Um, I, let me back up a second. Was it at the moment this happened? And I grew up on television. I mean, I grew up with television as a part of my life. I just did an interview on Monday with the CEO of Nexstar, Perry Sook, and we talked about where television has been and where it's going. And I remember certain events. I remember the moonwalk of 1969. I remember the JFK assassination. I was in 6th grade. And one of the other things, I remember Ronald Reagan after the Challenger explosion and how he tried to bring the country together. And I remember Barack Obama after Sandy Hook. And I thought to myself, this is why I'm glad I never want to have a chance to be president of the United States, because how do you do that? The consoler-in-chief thing that we try to bring people back. And then I saw President Trump from the Oval Office the night Charlie, and he's talking about vengeance. And I'm thinking to myself, because I was praying, I said, please let all of us from across the spectrum lay down our arms, and I mean that, I don't mean that literally, but let's just try to find a way to say a father and a husband was killed for expressing ideas in the country where that's what we were founded on. And let's just put all the other stuff aside. There'll be plenty of time for that. And just try to say, let's find a way to end this. And I don't think the president accomplished that night. And I wonder about you because, yeah, you get into the political realm. That's your job, okay? You fight the left, the right fight. It goes on and on. It's been going on. Although I'm old enough to remember when people actually got together at bars in D.C. and had a way of, figuring things out. Is that where we need – why can't we just take that pause and step back and say, forget the ideology? We just lost a person that died doing what makes America the country it is. Can't we do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I had the same hope you did, which was, that maybe this would be a moment where people could come together. But I think, Marty, all that was crushed within the first 30 minutes. I mean, I think two things happened with this brutal murder. Number one, I do think we're at a spiritual battle in the country.
Yep.
And you don't have to talk Christian faith, but just good versus evil. I think this is a very clear-cut example of somebody speaking, whether you agree or disagree with them, and somebody that says that we want him to stop speaking and I'm going to take his life.
Right.
99.9% of people would say that's good versus evil. We obviously call this out. The second thing that happened was the rabid response. And you could argue, well, the internet's just, things move much more quicker. People are screenshotting things and posting them. But that rattled me the most, were these people celebrating a friend of mine getting shot.
Yeah,
people
listen, I do not. That bothered me a lot. So I wasn't trying to lay this on one side or the other because that really upset me, made me mad. And because of my job, I cannot respond to people on the internet. I can't because, trust me, I was at my keyboard getting ready to do that, but I can't. But I just think, can't we find a way to just take the temperature down everywhere?
Right, but what got me was this wasn't a bunch of radicals on Reddit. These were teachers from my childhood. These were nurses, doctors, people that are respected in the community. And I probably agree with you more than you think, because when I saw that, my initial reaction is, man, some of these people really buy into this idea that if somebody represents your opposing views and you consider it hateful, or you consider that person to be a fascist, then it is justified to murder them.
No,
and when I saw normal people saying that, so do I agree with all the responses? No, I'm not here to say that. Do I agree with the idea that I want things to be toned down? Yes, but I think you have to ask the people that are celebrating the death of a 31-year-old kid, what is it that drives them to do that? And
completely
I think
agree.
That to me is the focus of trying to get this situation to where we don't see more violence.
Why would officials and I don't care about party because it's on both sides. Why would the word vengeance be an okay term? This isn't an eye for an eye. The man, and we don't know that much. Let's be honest. We really don't know that much about the shooter. I mean, there were a lot of people speculating right off the bat that it was this or this or this, and we're starting to learn a little bit more. The one text that he sent to his roommate about, I'm tired of his hate, and I'm going to end it. I understand being tired of the hate. I don't think that's a way to solve that problem. Okay, I'm not trying to give him, credit for taking him out. But the point is why would a word like vengeance be a part of anybody? That's the whole problem. Why can't we just step back, slow down? And like I said, when Reagan gave his speech about the loss of Challenger, that was, and now granted, he was really good. In front of a television camera. He had that star appeal. When Barack Obama is crying about the 6-year-olds that died at Sandy Hook, he had that, that empathy. You felt it. How could you, if you're a parent, you had to feel it. And I just wonder, we don't seem to do that anymore. We go right away to positions and we don't pay any attention to anything else. And I don't know, can we move forward if we keep doing that? I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying, why do we do it on both sides? Why can't we just learn one of these days before this place explodes into another civil war? Because honestly, the people that make that argument, it's hard to argue against that. That appears to be where we're going.
Yeah, I would start by saying I do think that we are in an ideological civil war.
Yep.
And I mean that. I obviously don't mean that with any type of threat of violence. I don't mean that I'm not encouraging anybody to take that step. But one of my good friends is in a box. He is dead because he wanted to speak freely. He wanted to be somebody that said, listen, we should have open debate and dialogue. So I understand Trump's response of saying that there is a vengeance in using that word. Could there have been a better word? Maybe, but I agree with it. Now, I agree with it in a peaceful way. I agree with it in the way of, we will get our revenge by winning politically. We will get our revenge by winning the hearts and minds of young people, by winning the hearts and minds of the American voters. So in that way, I do agree. I do think that, whether we're in a civil war or not, no, I'm not asking people to take up arms against our countrymen. But there seems to be this pattern on the left of saying that if you can justify taking somebody out that is hateful, that it is okay. And I think we have to go after that with a vengeance. We have to push back in a way that tells people that is not okay. Look at the response of George Floyd and his death versus Charlie Kirk. You had riots in the street, you had protesters, and you look at Charlie with these prayer vigils. You look at Charlie with people coming together. I would argue that is the unity message. The message is come together to defend free speech, defend our values, to just cherish what Charlie stood for. And I think that actions speak a lot louder than the words you might hear from certain leaders.
I won't disagree with that. But Cliff, let's hold on just a second, because this has bothered me for a long time. Do we always have to say left and right? I mean, it's like saying every Democrat is one of these people that just is celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, and every Republican is just calling them out and is holding prayer vigils because you're Republican, your belief in a God or a faith is really, I mean, there are these generalizations, and that's what bothers me about our politics. No matter where I'm registered, I'm a moderate, okay? I'm fiscally conservative. I lean socially, I lean to the left. I think we should take care of people. But people want to put me in a basket and call me whatever I am. Why do we do that? Why can't we just say we're all Americans? We have different views, but do we have a common goal? I mean, does that bother you at all that we get lumped in together?
Yeah, I mean, me, when I was in college, I was a radical libertarian, right? So that what you just said is probably, I got into this for economic reasons. I got into this for the idea of government's role when it comes to taxing, spending, regulating business. Marty, I'm going to tell you something, though, that changed in my life that really, I think, over the last probably year and a half to 2 years. Charlie, actually on his show, asked me once, he says, how does a Ron Paul libertarian end up supporting, the America First movement in one of the most important swing states running the ballot chase? And my answer is pretty simple. And this might be radical for your moderate stances or your positions, but there were a couple of things that really changed in my mind. Number one was the fentanyl crisis. I used to be somebody that said, listen, immigration, we want to support people, we want to help people. At a certain point, if you have an open border, the damage that can come of that, and to see the fentanyl, not just within my family, within my friend circle, within my community, just be completely run roughshod with some of the heroin and some of these addictions and fentanyl that were coming in. That was the first thing. The second thing, which I do think decided the election, and people might say, oh, it's only 5% of Democrats or 10% of Democrats that support this, is this idea of transing kids. This idea of saying that if a parent deems that they want to, change their child physically, I mean, we all remember that commercial with Kamala saying that she wanted to pay to transition inmates. That is such a radical position. Like at a certain point, I'm with you. It shouldn't always be left versus right. It shouldn't always be, evil versus good or good versus evil, because obviously there are different people with different positions. But right now, the Democrats have chosen with a lot of their big issues to side with the illegals over Americans, to side with the woke stuff over the blue collar family unit. And until they really figure that out, and by the way, I thought November 6th, the day after the election, that they would pivot back on all this stuff, because 80% of America, right, left, center, moderate, whatever you want to call them, 80% disagree with where the Democrats are on those positions. But I think you've seen the radicalization of the left in terms of the same 5 to 10% are kind of driving that. Where on the right, I feel like it's a lot more of the blue collar kind of working class issues that they're running on. And when those things collide, I don't know how Democrats win, but I'm with you. Not everybody should be put in a box. I've always been about independent thinking. I think Charlie represented that. But it's one of those situations where I don't know who the Democrat leader is right now. I don't
Right.
know what solutions they're bringing to the table. When it comes to the Republican Party, I do. And I think that who the nominee is in 28 for the Democrats is going to decide really the future of that party and the future of what the conversation looks like in American politics.
Cliff, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to get to something. You were in Evansburg not too long ago at a demonstration that ostensibly was against State Representative Frank Burns and his position on open carry. The Charlie Kirk murder was not a gun issue as far as I'm concerned. The guy got the gun legally and all that. But Charlie Kirk's own words were, unfortunately, there are going to be people who are killed. That's part of the thing about open carry. So you are a very strong supporter. You were there demonstrating against Frank Burns because you claimed he was not the supporter that you thought he should be. Does anything that's happened in the last week change that position for Cliff Maloney?
No, absolutely not. Deranged people are going to get weapons no matter what the laws are. I don't think that changes. And by the way, Frank Burns would publicly say he agrees with me, right? The problem with Frank Burns is for 20 years, Marty, I've known him when I was at school at UPJ. Frank would come to every pro-life event, every pro-gun event as a Democrat, which was very, very interesting for me. But he ran that way. And for years, I'll give him credit. He would vote very conservatively with the district. He would represent the people of Cambria County. Right. In a way that they supported. That all changed over the last year. And that's because he had the deciding vote on constitutional carry in Pennsylvania. And when the vote finally mattered for him, he sided with the union bosses, with the big money on the left, knowing that they spent millions to have him beat Amy Bradley and he would need them again. And so that's why I came to Evansburg, was to say, hey, listen, Frank, you've been exposed. When we really needed you the most, the entire population of Cambria County, when you look at if they support gun rights, they're 100% in. And he's going to do right now what every politician does. He's going to yap about how, well, now I'm doing a constitutional amendment. And actually, this is the process and that. Right. Frank, when the vote mattered, you were a fraud. You did not step up. You did not support what you said for 20 years you would support. And that's because he knows he needs the support of the left. And he had to switch his vote. He had to compromise his vote. And look, I'm not against people on personal grounds. He took this vote. We are now going to go into the district at Citizens Alliance through our PHA's program. We are going to educate every single voter, Democrat, Republican, you name it, on who Frank Burns truly is based on his voting record. And if he can still win after that, that's on him. But we want to make sure we do our civic duty of educating every person in Cambria County about what Frank Burns just did to just trample the gun rights in Pennsylvania.
Let me give you, in the little bit of time we have left, an opportunity to pay tribute to your friend, and do it, if you can, in a way that we find good out of the way Charlie Kirk died.
I think Charlie Kirk will go down in history as one of the most prolific defenders of free speech. I look at what he built at Turning Point USA, on his political arm, Turning Point Action. I don't think Donald Trump wins the election in 2024 if not for having Charlie Kirk in his orbit. Like I said, he's a great man behind the scenes, somebody that, what you see on camera was exactly what you saw off camera. And I think that Marty and everybody on your team, the drill. Sometimes you meet people and what you get on screen is not what you get when you're in the green room. That was not the case with Charlie. He was a very good soul, a very good human being. He lived a Christian life much better than I could ever admit to living. And I think at the end of the day, the good things that will come from this tragedy are the idea being that I do think free speech will become an even more profound thing in American history. I think what he's trying to build with being a peacemaker and having people have honest conversations, I think that now is going to have a larger microphone, a larger platform, a larger spotlight. But to see somebody at 31 years old lose their life when they're trying to ask people to peacefully engage in dialogue and debate, I think it's a brutal moment for the country. But I think from here moving forward, it only gets better. I think rational thought, rational actions will prevail. And I think that's the beauty of America. I appreciate you letting me talk about Charlie today, Marty.
No, I think, as I tried to tell you, as I said to you, though, I don't think a lot of people knew a lot about Charlie Kirk. If you listened to him, if you were part of his organization, you knew him. Otherwise, he was that guy sitting under a tent at a college campus who lost his life in a brutal way. And, unfortunately, we make a big splash whatever we do, you've made splashes. I make splashes every day. Doesn't really say anything about who we are or what we're trying to accomplish. So I was happy to give you that platform. And you and we didn't always agree politically when you were in school. We're not going to agree politically probably as we go through life. But I'm thankful that we could sit down. And this is what I wish for the country, that other people could do what you and I just did over the last half hour. And that's have a conversation about how we end what's going on here. Cliff Maloney, always a pleasure, brother. I think fondly of those days back at UPJ. I wish you well, sir. And again, even though you got an ugly hat on, thanks for being with us.
Go Birds. Thanks, Marty.
All right, Cliff, thank you. And thank you for watching.